So it doesn't create the terminators? Sorry. Alrighty, so let's see if we can shave this baby off. I don't know if the audio is working on that. Can you hear me now? Is audio working? Can you hear me? You can hear me, right? I did want to take a picture of this with my, I don't think I can do a camera picture at the same time as I do a video streaming. Shaving in a camera is not easy. Wow, that's a lot of hair. That is weird. Okay. All right, so is my audio working on here or no? I don't know if I can be heard, but I think that's pretty much the shave. Starting the year off with a new shave. And fold that up and get that out of the way. A few of them got under that anyway. How did that even happen? All right, cool. So, a couple of other things I wanted to try out this time is one of the things I've been experimenting with this year was doing some brewing of mead. So, honey wine. And I did 2 flavors. I did a mulled spice mead. There's a whole gallon of it over there brewing, but this is a sample from that I'm going to try. I couldn't filter off all the herbs and stuff on it, but I think when I bottle it, when I rack it, I'll be able to do it better. That's interesting. I'm not much for a dry wine, and that has a pretty dry wine taste to it. It's not bad. It's wow. I don't know if I'm wondering if I got a little heavy on some of the spices on that one. Whew. Definitely has some alcohol on it. Good Lord. And this one is a maple vanilla. I'm hoping this one's pretty good. Ooh, it does smell very good. Ooh. It's got some punch to it too. But that's very tasty actually. That's pretty good. Ooh. It's got an alcohol punch to it that I'm not much of a drinker, so. Oof. It's definitely got some bite to it. Oh, I can feel that burning down its. Yep. It shouldn't be too much. I mean, it's got somewhere in the range of probably about 13 to 15% alcohol by volume. So it's about like a wine. But, whew. I may have to thin those down for my taste buds. Man, I have not seen this face in a year. That's going to take some serious getting used to. I don't know if I'll keep it this clean shaven for terribly longer. I imagine it'll grow back in the goatee at least. But actually, I'm okay with it. It's not bad. All right, so. Ooh. The alcohol in that is harsh. I was thinking it would be a little bit sweeter, but I do think it has to probably age a little bit. I mean, it's literally a month and a half old, so it could probably do some aging. All righty. Well, this is New Year's. We are going to East Coast time, crossing over into New Year's Eve in 2 minutes. So I will probably stick around through my New Year's here. I don't know that I'll stick around through your New Year's where you are. But I hope you have a good New Year's. I hope you're doing well. and that the new year coming in is better than the old one going out. But I'm also going to get started planning my animation for the month of January. So let's have ourselves a look here. January animation. So let's have a thought on some of that. Now, it might be over ambitious for me to think about doing some big projects. And so I really do think I'm going to do my best to keep it simple. To do a 5-minute, wow, that's hitting hard. I can feel that just landing in my stomach. Good Lord. Yeah, there's definitely an alcohol burn to that. Let's hope it doesn't mess me up. I'm a lightweight when it comes to some of that stuff. All right, so January animation. Oof. So we did some stuff for story generations in the last 12 months of story ideas. What were some of the ones that we really kind of landed on that were kind of fun? We did Ghostbusters, Terminator. Did we do Matrix? No, we did Jurassic Park. See, a lot of these would be very ambitious animation projects. I think it might be more to the point of the goal for the project to do a sort of we could do something along the lines of, like, I know I joke around where I work a lot, and there's some definitely amusing stories from work that I could tell. And I know one of the things we talked about, I don't know if it was this year or last year, that we were looking at doing a series of videos that were reactions or recreations of funny events from where I worked. And I do think I could probably do a few of those as animations. Like, okay, let's see if I can, do I have a file for that somewhere? Documents. Art styles, no. Branding. I don't know. Like, I swear I saw this recently somewhere. Wow, that booze is hitting me quick. It's more booze than I'm used to drinking. No, that's not it. No. Game designs? No. No. Okay, here we go. Oh, okay, skits. Skit ideas. Hypothetical arguments I've won in the shower, volume 1 to 16. No, that's not quite it. Okay, so that's not the file I was looking for. So there are some skits in there, and that might be good for Skitober, which is October skits. I know I had a list somewhere, and it may be one of those things that I lost when the hard drive crashed, that were ideas for doing videos about events that have happened to me at work. No, it's not there. Desktop. No. Okay, so we did look through League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, Jurassic Park, Roger Rabbit, Blade Runner, Buffy, Toy Story, Gremlins, Stargate. We could potentially play with some of that. But I think overall, like the ideas that we had that were skits based off of my job and life experiences, I think that could be more fun. And I may have to rebuild that list. So there would be events like the Wendy's drive-through incident that I can just reference there. And then there's like jokes that I pull at the register for people. There was one that I was going to do that was there are a few of them. One of them I was going to do was rhubarb. Is basically just a weird conversation I've had at one point about whether or not rhubarb. Like, who discovered that you could eat rhubarb to a certain point, and past that point it's poisonous, and that whole routine. So that's one of the ones that I was going to play at. I swear I've seen this file recently. I don't know where it is, and I'll have to do some research. I might have to. I'll see if I can do a search on this PC. See if it'll find it. I don't imagine it will, but we can try. It's not going to hurt us to give a search. Happy New Year, guys. We have hit New Year's. I am feeling the drink. I didn't think it was that much, but I mean, I guess it's a high proof wine that I made. Whew. I didn't think it was that powerful. Ha! Whew. Yeah, don't breathe that stuff in. Wow. I guess we're going to find out tomorrow whether or not it killed me. Yeah, so I could probably build a new list. Let's just start doing this in this file. I mean, this file I have is a recipe for something else, but we'll separate it out later. So I can do animations of interactions I've had at the register working retail in the past. That's a pretty straightforward animation process that I can imagine, where it would be really just building the set and then animating the characters in the set. And you would build the set from two perspectives. So the perspective of somebody, basically the register with me behind it, and then in that frame of reference, you'd have the register with me behind it, and then the customer between the viewer and me at the register, and then just a close-up of me at the register. So you would have like a distance shot of me at the register with customer in between, then me at register, close-up, then potentially a shot of the register and me ringing things over it. And then a perspective from my point of view of the customer and the interaction I'm having there. And with those frames of reference, I think there's probably more than 3. So we'd have wide shot, close shot, maybe a close-up of me, close-up of the register, my point of view. So it's about 5 different shots. And if you build those shots, you build the sets for those shots, then it's really just about the characters in the animation. So I would need myself and the customers. So I would need like 3 generic customers for the most part. And it's largely going to be them, mostly stationary, maybe with some hand gestures. And their mouths and eyes moving. So that makes it a lot more streamlined for what I need to do. So like you can build a still image for the set. You might even build the set with figures moving around in the background. So you could make a generic figure moving around in the background if you want to. I think at this point, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to do a basic set from the wide, close-up, and reverse angle shots. And then I guess it's technically still a set shot if you do an image of the register. And then what I need to do with images of the register, I need to do images of what I'm ringing up. Now, for some of those stories, like there's one story where, one of the classic games as a cashier is ringing up items and then making a story out of the items that go through. Like one of my favorite things to do is like when it's food items, go, well, that looks like an interesting recipe. You're going to use the Velveeta cheese and chocolate-covered graham crackers and raisins. What kind of recipe are you making with those? Just kind of like the realization that there's an absurdity to, like, they're not meant to be used together, But that's the game you play. Now, I could potentially also do, no, like that one requires each of the items being rung up to be a visual item that I have to scan. There are other ones that are more simple, one item shots. So there are a couple of those that are kind of funny. And I think that would be easier. But one of the ones that goes through my mind was there was somebody who had, I think it was cat treats, cat toys, cat bed, butcher's knife, and garbage bag. And I'm like, I'm there for like the first third of this trip. The rest of it, I have some questions about. They're not intended to be seen as a sequence of events that are happening. But that cashier's game does lead you to go like, oh, so you're leading the cat with treats towards the bed where you're going to slaughter it and put it in a trash bag and throw it out. Now that one, each one of those items would have to be scannable and shown being scanned. That could be a 1 to 2 minute skit, I imagine. There are a few others, like one that I would desperately love to do, and it would be a lot more work, is there was a customer who went through my register years ago when I worked in a retail store. They brought a basket full of stuff up, and I pulled out the first item and made a pun about it based off of what it was. And I scanned it, and then I punned the next item, and then the next item, and he said, "Are you going to do that for every item in that basket?" And I reached into the basket and pulled out a can of soup, and I said, "Let's see if I can." And I rang it up, and I proceeded for the rest of the purchase to make a pun for every single item. And it was like 20 or 30 items went through that register. And every single one, I'd make like a snarky joke about and a pun, and I'd ring it up. And he would try to catch up and try to catch me on one and like see if he could stump me with another item. It was a blast. It was one of my favorite cashier experiences. And that would be amazingly fun to do as an animation. It would also require that I do an animation for every single item. Not only as it goes over the register, but half the fun of it was just the truly goofy way of interacting with the customer. Because it was sometimes like, let's see if I can. Beep. And it was like things like that. Like, you not only have to do a picture of the item as it goes over the scanner, but me waving it around and making jokes about it. That would be fun to do as an animation. That's definitely going to be, like, that animation might end up being a solid 5 minutes by itself. But the amount of work to put into doing that, I think could probably be several hours. Per item, in some cases. Wow, that has a kick. Woohoo! Wow, that has a punch. And that's primarily the maple vanilla one. I haven't sipped a lot on the spiced one. Spiced one's got a little bit of a bite to it. Actually, that's not bad. Ooh. Oh. Good Lord. Those have some kick. Anyway, so I think I'm going to do probably some of the simpler skits. I think that could be fun to do. And especially if I can get to the 5 minute margin with a couple of those skits. I think I could probably, if I do it right, I could get to the 5-minute margin for those skits collectively. Just a few of them, like 2 or 3 of those skits collectively would net me a 5-minute animation. And I imagine with the simplicity of the structuring of that, I can get that done maybe before mid-month. And if I keep my mind on the process, I'm going to potentially sort of step into more ambitious ones. I may dabble a little bit with stop motion animation. Just to try out a couple of other methods of animation. I don't know what I would stop motion animate, but I think if I were to do that the simplest way possible, I would probably do paper cutout figures and animate those frame by frame, and maybe do a shorter stop motion animation. That could be fun just to dabble with. That's going to be exploring those ideas simply. Like there's in-camera editing and then there's After Effect animation. And in-camera editing would be literally like, how can you build this to be the simplest thing to shoot? And once you figured out, like, this is 3 shots used multiple times for different scenes. It's sort of like when I talk about potentially this year doing the movie, the indie film. That idea of doing a movie in a month on a 0 budget movie idea. Like, at that point, it behooves you to figure out how you're going to be able to stitch together simple crafts foam or scrap fabrics to make costumes. You set it up in a room with a green screen, and you build the other sets in miniature out of scrap materials. And that's your whole, you are the actor. There are no other actors involved in this process. And that's in-camera editing, so that when you set it up, everything you do on that camera is set up to minimize the work that has to be done behind the camera after the shot has been made. The editing room floor needs to be sparsely populated by the end. Like, if you can establish something early on to be like set up in such a way that the shot that the camera takes is the shot that goes into the film, it's really just stitching together what you make at that point. The less you have to do with extraneous fiddling and playing around afterwards, the more you get out of each minute of shooting. But the trade-off for that is the planning and the strategy into making those in-camera shots first. I am feeling a little lightheaded. It shouldn't kick in that fast, but it seems to have kicked in pretty quickly. So Happy New Year's. We're 35 minutes in. I don't know. I think I can probably pull another 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah, that's fair. And then I'm going to head out and check in with some of my friends and family for the holiday. In the meantime, that is mostly, I think, where we're going to end up going with the planning for animation. In-store jokes. I could probably stitch together a few of them into a 5-minute routine. It's almost like a stand-up comedy routine. And that's the other thing you could do. You could do like a stand-up stage with the comic standing on stage and the generic audience shapes in the front, like grayed out figures from behind, and they're standing there as the comic does their routine, and you do your animated comedic routine. So all you would really need is maybe moving left and right figures. Like basically you would need legs from the left side, the right side, the front side, and that's it. And then the torso would left, right, center, but then arms gesturing with the microphone. And then the head left, right, center, and then maybe a few other expressions like and then eyes, nose, and mouth. Well, nose should be pretty stationary. It doesn't do a whole lot. But the mouth and the eyes vary for expression and for speaking. And other than that, you could do a whole stand-up comedy routine as an animated character. That would be worth experimenting with. Now, I wonder, like if I can do that with drawing, but you could also do that with cutouts. Like if you think of like South Park. South Park is shapes cut out of paper, but it's shapes cut out of paper that are eventually shapes cut out of paper would be used as basis for building computer animated models. Because South Park, I believe, they don't use paper anymore. I think past the first season of Creations, they stopped using paper. And it's all computer animated components. They may have only done like one episode or two episodes. They may not have even done any episodes in paper. They may have actually eventually just scanned all the components and compiled them in computer and done it all as computer animation. Ooh, a lot of alcohol burn on that. That's almost like drinking a vodka. Whew. Would clips like G Grand Theft Auto be copyright issued? I mean, I know of some people who have done like music videos where they use clips, they use characters and sets from games and they just tweak them. But I think what you're using in that sense is you're using the sets as backdrops in another engine. I think was it Unity? There's a game engine that lets you take and make your own games, and it's one of the things I thought about doing with like RPG Maker is using that to build animations. Because all you'd have to do is build a set in an RPG Maker, and then you can move the characters around in it. And then I don't know if there's a way to do like close-ups of faces done as pixel art, but you might be able to do it. I thought about just really doing like an animated short where you have pixel art of characters. Like if you look at the Mortal Kombat characters from one of like the first gen Game Boy characters, their heads are like 4 pixels to 6 pixels in size, or their faces are like 4 pixel squares. And then there's a hairstyle, and then there's the body built around it. And it's weird because I can remember even worse pixel art of characters from games very early on. Like Atari level character design was literally like the worst. It's vaguely humanoid shaped, and they weren't great. But building characters like that and building a cityscape or a landscape behind them and doing interactions and gigs and routines with those is one thing you can do relatively easily. Once you get a little bit more into the game engine art, I don't know if there's a copyright issue with, like, I know in what is it, the Cyberpunk 2077, there's a lot of ability to customize the characters, but those abilities to customize the characters are still limited. Like, they have to program the parameters for each of those features. Like, if you build a character, an original character off of those designs, how proprietary is that design? I don't know. I really don't know what's the hard limit. So I don't know how far you could get away with some of that. Now, there was something, I'm trying to think, what was it? Yeah, I definitely feel woozy. There was a modeling program, because I was looking at systems that let you do, like, there's a program called Luppet. It's a virtual puppet that lets you, there's virtual tubers. You could look at AI Angel. There's another one out there right now who's picking up in popularity. But these are essentially VTubers. If you look up the term VTubing and VTube, you can see some of it. And there's some very basic, simple software that lets you build a 3D computer animated Japanese animation style character that becomes a puppet, and you can use a webcam to map your face movements, and it'll do stuff to mirror that facial movement. Characters like AI Angel, and there's another one, I don't remember her name, where they've built their characters in Unity with the sets in Unity, and they've built these complex puppets, and they use motion capture outfits to mirror their actions in the puppet, and they act out these things, and you can build virtual puppets, virtual characters to do this with. I think you can do it in Blender, but I think there's another piece of software that's meant to virtually map a human figure that you can custom shape and design. Now, at the end of the day, what you're talking about in the long run of using these softwares, getting the rights to your character, and being able to use them in a motion cap suit. Like, the motion cap suits are like $13,000. And so you can end up with like hugely expensive processes to have a virtual puppet that you can use. The animation of some of those characters in game terms, I think you would be better suited in a system like Unity, where you can build your own sets and build your own characters. I think if you were to use a Grand Theft Auto or something like that, it's a little bit harder. Like, it's a little bit like wishy-washy, because I think at that point what you're getting from those games might qualify for fair use, because you're doing something creatively and distinctively from those things. I know there are people who play like Red Dead Redemption games, and they take photos of the characters in different positions and frames, and they post them to their social media, and that's okay. There's nobody coming for those people. Woo! Woo! That's got a bite to it. It's a lot of alcohol in that. I didn't think it was that high in alcohol content. Good Lord. So I do think that there's some question as to whether or not you could get video game. Well, I don't know. Like, would it be fair use or not? I don't know for sure. And I think probably you'd be in that position where, like, it's not targeted often for legal response until it becomes big and popular. Like, once somebody gets to the point where they make a big score off of something like that, like, it's not worth the companies chasing down. But if you end up making a full-time living off of doing videos and animations that way, you might get targeted. But nobody's going to know for sure until somebody does. It's just not, there's no certainty to that. So, I mean, my inclination is to always err on the side of not risking getting targeted for copyright issues. And doing it, I know there's the anime character style virtual puppets that you can do. And there's a free piece of software. Like, you can use that piece of software to build your puppets. And you can animate them to a limited degree. You don't get fine details of animation with it. But I do believe it's open. It's you can make whatever you want with it, and they're not going to give you any issues about it. I think that's probably the more safe route than using a GTA. But if you're just doing simple goof things for GTA, I don't think anybody's going to hunt you down. But if you make an entire channel around your science experiment narrator and guide being a GTA character in a building doing certain routines, and you use that to, there might be some room for somebody to come pecking at your door. And I don't know, I'm trying to remember VTube. Virtual actors. In general, virtual humans employed in movies are known as synth sapiens, virtual actors, vactors, and cyberstars. Critics such as the very thing that art was supposedly preserving, our point of contact with the irreplaceable finite person, whatever. Nobody cares. Use the digital clone in movie industry to replicate the acting performance of a cloned person. No, that's not what we're talking about. I'm trying to remember what the name of that piece of software was. Creating VTuber avatars. Okay, somehow I hit caps lock on there. So you want to be a VTuber. Vroid, VROID Studio is the easiest way to go forward. It will give you a very anime style character. And it's pretty much free to use. 2D, so Vroid will give you a computer looking 3D model of an anime character. But there is a piece of software that lets you do 2D animation style characters, but it's more expensive. So I don't recommend it. Okay, so what's the 2D version? Live 2D. No, okay, so there's not a lot of information out there, and you'd have to really dig. So a motion cap suit is the big one. Okay, so what's the name of this one here? Code Miko is the other the virtual tuber, a mildly anime, more realistic looking character with a young woman who modeled her and the set that she works in using a motion capture suit. So if you have the chance to check her out, CODEMIKO, and she uses Unreal Engine for some of her stuff. But there's another one. It was an open source program for modeling human figures. Okay, I'm trying to figure out, like, there's probably some reference somewhere, but I'm a little hazy at this point, and I'm not sure I'm going to get any real useful data from Google search because it never gives me what I need. There was a 2D software that was expensive to use. Maya and Blender to create 3D characters from scratch, and then you would use software like Luppet, I think, would be one of the easiest ways to do it. There are tools such as Vroid and Live 2D for illustrators to create anime-style characters as if you are drawing. The best part of these tools is that you do not need to work on the rigging process. For example, Vroid provides its own pre-rigged base models so that a user can add details. So that's for using something that your body or your mouth movements are mirrored by the puppet. Now, could you do something in-game with a game software? Maybe. But I would think that what you'd want to use for that would be you would want to use something along the lines of Unity is a piece of software that you should be able to use, but it costs you to use it. Unity is not a cheap piece of software last time I checked. Poser, maybe, but the hurdle with Poser is it gives you a lot of Gumby-like characters. Like I know a friend who uses Poser to create characters to Photoshop into some of his photographs of real landscapes, and the characters look terrible in the long run. Now, I would feel like you could probably commission a creator to make a 3D character with puppet tabs that you could use to move the mouth, change the eyes, and things like that. I mean, that's the biggest hurdle in a lot of this. Like, you can do a lot of animation with barely moving characters. The biggest problem you're going to have is mouth and eye movement mapping to the face. Because you can make a different set of eyes and a different mouth for every frame that you need to be different. So if you create a shot where somebody's talking about their favorite hobby, and you set it up in such a way that the mouth has to move with the talking, and the eyes have to move with the blinking that a normal human does, if the character doesn't move, there's some examples of that on YouTube. There are videos where they use like those, what are those Funko Pop characters that they use as a base, and they basically have an animated version of those. They've made simple artwork for that. And they have a mouth that changes to basically 3 to 4 different shapes, and the eyes blink. And that's all they do. The character stands there for the most part, and occasionally they'll have a change from holding a cup to sipping from a cup to holding a cup. And those pieces of software can be used to build a simple animated video where the character stands and just talks to the audience. And that's the simplest form. But the real hurdle is the moment you try to get expressive with a character, where a character goes like, what? That tip of the head, if you don't have a way to map those eyes to a certain location on the head, then they're not going to stay with the head when it moves. So you can build the head and do the animation of the tipping head, but unless you track the eyes specifically to follow, and some of the editing software out there, like I know HitFilm Pro, HitFilm Express I can use. There's a feature that lets you set points on an object and then set objects to track those points. There might be a slight micro lag in the movement, which would make it look weird, but maybe you could get away with it. That's a real tricky process to make that work right. And in the long run, doing an animation, that's one of the things you're going to end up playing with, is making the choices of how you're going to shoot the shot based off of the best opportunities. So, like, you can do a stationary figure with moving around in the background and then occasionally moving the head or the hands or something like that. It's degrees of motion. You'll have basically wider spectrum of the world moving around the character moving slightly, like the character's body moving slightly. The facial expressions are the things that are going to move the most. And so you build a world that moves a lot in components that are easy enough to do. So like somebody who's standing in a crowd, you can set up basically a banner at the bottom that is humanoid shapes of shadows with eyes on them that move sort of like this, back and forth along the bottom of the screen. And then another layer up from that, moving at a different rate, so that the two interact in a way that looks like crowds moving around, and your character somewhere in the middle of the frame doing basic sprite motions, walking, jumping, turning from left to right, facing front, those kinds of things. And if you keep to those and do them a lot less than all the other motion around you in the scene, it makes it possible to make it look like you're doing a huge animated scene, but really what you're doing is simplifying the motions on the outside, making them more vague, more abstract. And then in the center are the more concrete motions that are important to expressing what you're expressing, but you're doing it in such a way that you're using like a conservation of effort, where the expression you're using at the time is one that, whoa, geez, whew, that's got a lot of bite to it. The expression you're using at the time is one expression per minute to 2.5 minutes. Well, actually, seconds is probably a better frame of reference. When you look at a news broadcast, when the anchor is talking to you, you're used to seeing a sort of motion to what's happening in the broadcast. If you turn on a news program or anything with an anchor, that anchor is relatively stationary. He's sitting behind a desk. He's not walking. He's not picking a lot of things up. He's just talking to you. But if you turn the sound off on a news broadcast like that, and you really see every time the perspective changes from camera 1 to camera 2, where it's like a different position, and those different positions are what switches. How often does that happen? It's probably about every 5 seconds. That's usually like one of the hallmarks of news broadcasts and news media, is if you sit too long with a one frame reference like we do on this channel too often, this single frame headshot is not dynamic. It's not attention getting. But this same shot with two different cameras, good Lord, I got the hiccups now. I'm 2 glasses of wine in and I'm already freaking stumbling. One frame of reference and another camera for like camera B, switching between the two of those, add a third camera for 3 camera shots. Same character, relatively stationary. You need an animation for my hand to move in various ways, mouth, eyes, and that's it. But you need it for each of those 3 cameras. If you can do that, you can get a dynamic animated character animation that really kind of catches the eye and catches the attention. The problem comes when you're doing longer form animation where the expectation is events happen in the story. It's not somebody just narrating or telling jokes that you can use as a base, like a stationary figure to tell your story. It's the, character interacts with other character, scene moves perspective, dynamic photography, like a high angle coming in at night, slats and the blinds affecting the light on the face. Like those kind of playing around with effects, each one of them adds whole new layers of, you have to remember, you have to build every one of those effects into the work. And if that's what you're doing, it's not as easy to do as we would like. And it's going to add hours of work. But like I said earlier on, the in-camera editing that you do is what you get when you set up the shot to be as simple and use repetitive works. Like I can remember, I'm sure you can remember, when we used to have animations of like the Justice League or things, Hanna-Barbera animations. They would reuse shots over and over again to tell the same story. Now, the very first episode that they made that way was probably hugely expensive and hugely time consuming to get all the shots and all the effects they needed to get into the situation. But once you've made a character from 5 different angles and the ability to express 15 different emotions on that character, and the ability to lay that character over 17 different backdrops, you can reuse that footage over and over again in 100,000 different ways. And that's super useful. But that first one is always going to be the one that you spend 6 months building the effort to. And then other episodes can be shot with the same footage, different dialogue. So how many times does Superman stand in front of a generic bland colored background and pontificate about truth, justice, and the American way? You can use that shot hundreds of thousands of times through a series of animation. But the first time you made it, it took a long time to build that. But as you get later in the season, you start writing episodes in a way that uses what you've already got the ability to use. And that's the hurdle we're looking at right now. If I'm going to be doing an animation, a 5-minute animated feature using bare minimum material, I'm going to have to do a sort of a half-assed version of this, where I build the 15 most common positions and positioning for every frame of a character that gets me the result of being able to tell the story that I want to tell. And once you've got that, you've got an inventory. Like, you want to build the inventory of expressive features. It's sort of like, a good example of what to do with this would be to take a movie like any movie out of the last 15 years and take scenes from that movie and edit those scenes to create a new movie. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to create a whole new movie out of scenes of an existing movie, but you have to create the individual scenes. So in the case of taking like a movie like Iron Man and saying, I'm going to take Iron Man, take the scenes, cut and edit it to express a romance, like a romance between a dorky professor and a mad scientist who doesn't have the time to pay attention to him. You can cut that movie together to tell that story, redub the audio to do that. And when you do that, what you're going to end up finding is there are certain scenes that you can, certain poses and expressions from characters that you can use to tell a lot of story. And then the background behind them is irrelevant. You can adjust that whatever you need it to be. You can do a pastel green and a pastel pink. And it doesn't matter when you're doing a lot of dialogue and expressive features on the characters. It would be fun to do an experiment where you take a like a character's scene, pull out the backdrop and do like a green screen bland effect and see if you can edit together an active story within the frame of reference of those characters. Make whole new character designs, and just through dubbing audio over edited scenes. A good example of this is Kung Pao Enter the Fist. They used kung fu movies with the same actors. They cut, like, I think it was like 2 or 3 different movies, scenes from 2 or 3 different movies, spliced them together in a new way to tell a new story with those footages. They dubbed in new dialogue and made a whole new movie out of it. And that is really what you're doing with animation. You're splicing together films. But what you need to do is break down what are the ones that you're going to get the most use out of. Like, theoretically, if you get 3 to 5 scenes with a given character expressing something in front of a generic background, you have enough that you can build a back and forth scene interaction between characters. And then all you need is to stitch in some transition scenes. The character walking across a workshop, the character jumping over something in the road on the way to wherever they're going next. Whatever your transition scenes. So I do feel like it's possible to really kind of do some really intricate, weird things. But I do wonder if there are ways that make this easier. So you have to position the head, position the upper torso in most cases. They don't usually do a full body shot. Full body shots are usually transition scenes. And those, oddly enough, are going to be the hardest to work on. Like, you could literally do, I think, 3 to 5 scenes where it's an upper torso, blank expression, one shot, the person they're talking to, one shot, person they're talking to, one shot, person they're talking to. Now, you're going to need character 1, character 2, possibly 2 more characters. You could do a back and forth dynamic with that mindset. Now, you can reuse those over and over again, flip them left to right for a couple other times, and then adjust the eyes and the mouth for interactions. And you've got all the dialogue and the emotion and the story of the characters interacting. And then the transition scenes where it's like a full upper body or a full body shot moving through a scene. Those are going to be the most labor intensive to get right. But if you only have 3 to 4 of those in a session, I think you could probably do pretty good. Now, your first animation isn't going to be the best thing in the world. There's going to be upgrades you can make to your animation style, like motion blur. Like my hand moving there across the screen, you can't tell how many fingers I have up at a given time because of my hand becomes one blur. That effect is something we're used to seeing in movies. Oh, and I think we just crossed New Year's in your area, so Happy New Year's. So motion blur is an effect that adds realism and dynamics to your shots. Walking towards the camera is something that adds dynamics to your shots. Doing like a film noir would be fun to do, but it's labor intensive to do the lighting dynamics on the face that changes every shot. it's tricky to do right. I do think there's a certain appeal to doing puppetry and virtual puppetry because it eliminates some of that labor intensive frame by frame work. But for now, we are an hour and 15 minutes into this. I am going to say Happy New Year's to you. Take care, and I will catch you back here on Sunday. I think it is. No, Thursday, right? What day is today? Friday? Yes, today's Friday. So Sunday is the next day. I will catch you back on Sunday. Take care and have a wonderful night. Happy New Year. Yes, I did try them out. I did try out those glasses, and I went into the kitchen and I had turned on the light in the living room, and it left little highlights on all the objects in the kitchen, like the glass bottles, my spice rack, and everything had little points of light that were reflecting from the other room, and all these little hearts appeared on everything. It was very interesting. I don't know what I would do with it yet, but I'm sure I'll find an interesting way to use it. So I do thank you for those. But for now, take care. That's me drunken typing. Take 2 glasses of mead and I'm under the table. I'm a lightweight, I guess. All right. Catch you later. See you on Sunday.